Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. The question on Easter Sunday morning is not, was Jesus of Nazareth raised from the dead? The question is, what difference does it make? What difference does it make in your life and in my life and in our world in 2016 that some 2,000 years ago, Jesus of Nazareth was raised from the dead? What difference does the resurrection of Jesus make now? Let me answer that question with 4 insights. First of all, the resurrection validates Jesus of Nazareth. The resurrection validates Jesus of Nazareth. If the Palestinian Herald had printed a piece about this Jesus of Nazareth dying, it would have been a short piece and it would have been simple. It would have gone something like this. He was born in Bethlehem. He grew up in Nazareth. He became an itinerant preacher and teacher. He was arrested for teaching. He was and crucified. End of story. He was born in Bethlehem. He grew up in. He became an itinerant preacher and teacher. He was arrested for inflammatory, convicted, and he was crucified. End of story. Certainly the religious authorities of that day and time agreed with that. It is purported that Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor over Judea, wrote to his friend Seneca these words shortly after the crucifixion of Jesus. I tried and condemned the prisoner Jesus. He was crucified at once along with some other prisoners who were awaiting execution. By this time, Jesus is buried. The trial was short, but in due form and order, and I condemned him, as I had no other choice, to death. After all, what does it matter? The man is a person of no consequence, the son of a common workman. What does it matter? Just another Jew put to death. Case closed. End of story. End of conversation. A misguided Jewish prophet properly put to death. And then God raised him from the dead. The resurrection was God's way of saying then and God's way of saying now that Jesus was more than some itinerant preacher and teacher, that he was more than just another of history's notable religious teachers, that he was and he is the Son of God. By the resurrection, you and I know for certain that this man who walked the face of this earth was not just some good preacher and teacher and prophet. He was and he is the Son of God. And as I've said so often before, because he is the Son of God, what he believed, we need to believe. And how he lived, we need to live. Second thing, the resurrection brings God's promise of hope and of help. There's a moving scene in John's account of the resurrection where Mary Magdalene is waiting outside the tomb, having come to the tomb and found it empty, and she's crying profusely. And according to John's account, as Mary is crying, Mary Magdalene, an angel comes and he says to Mary, "Woman, why are you crying? Woman, why are you crying?" Well, why do any of us cry? We cry because life can be hard. We cry because we face dark difficulties and challenges. We cry because life can be at times for us full of heartbreak and of difficulty. There is not a one of us gathered in this sanctuary on this Easter Sunday morning who can say that we have not faced some difficulty in our lives that has challenged us. And I want to assure you that when you leave this sanctuary this morning, on this Easter Sunday morning, you will not leave this place, nor will I leave this place with the promise that life will not bring some difficulty. One Sunday morning, a preacher distributed to his congregation 3x5 cards. He had them in the pews. And at the proper time during the sermon, he asked them to take the 3x5 cards and to write on them a conclusion to this statement: "I'm crying because." So the preacher had 3x5 cards out in the pews. During the sermon, he had the congregation take the 3x5 cards and complete the sentence, I'm crying because. And he got, I'm crying because I miss my loved ones so much. I'm crying because I just received a diagnosis that is scary. I'm crying because my marriage is in trouble and divorce seems likely. I'm crying because I'm in the dark and I don't know what to do. I'm crying because of the deep guilt I feel for my past actions. I'm crying because my body is in pain and I cannot find relief. I'm crying because my financial situation is a mess. I'm crying because God seems so far away and I don't know what to do. I'm crying because I can't seem to find my way forward. I'm crying because of strained relationships in my life. And if I handed out 3x5 cards to you this morning and I ask you to complete the sentence, I'm crying because, your list would include everything I just said and many more. The resurrection is God's way of telling you and me that whatever the challenge we face, whatever the difficulty in life, whatever the heartbreak, the same God who raised Jesus of Nazareth from the dead is the God who is at work in your life and in my life right now, right here, whatever we face. Just think about that. That the God who raised Jesus of Nazareth from the dead is your loving God, and no matter what you face in life, He is here with you. You're never alone. The God of resurrection who raised Jesus to life is the God of resurrection who will be sure that good comes out of us in the most challenging moments of our lives. Will you believe that this Easter Sunday? Not that God's going to promise you no difficulty, but that God will promise you there is no difficulty beyond His ability to raise you up and to help you on and to bring you hope. Third thing, the resurrection confirms that there is life after death. If you were to turn to your hymnal this morning to page 707, you would find one of the most inspiring hymns in our tradition. It's called Hymn of Promise. Hymn of Promise was written by Natalie Sleeth in 1985. It contains these words. In the bulb there is a flower, in the seed an apple tree, in cocoons a hidden promise, butterflies will soon be free. In the cold and snow of winter, there's a spring that waits to be, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. In our end is our beginning, in our time infinity, in our doubt there is believing, in our life eternity. In our death a resurrection, at the last a victory, unrevealed until its season, something God alone can see. Tragically, that song was first publicly performed at the death of her husband, Ronald Sleeth. Shortly after she wrote that beautiful hymn, Hymn of Promise, her husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And from the moment of the diagnosis until the moment of his death was 21 days. And in that 21 days, Ronald Sleeth asked his wife to be sure that Hymn of Promise was sung at his funeral, and it was. Tragically, again, a few years later, Natalie Sleeth learned that she had terminal cancer, and she died in 1992. During her illness, Natalie Sleeth wrote a letter to her grandchildren. The writer of this hymn, Hymn of Promise, wrote a letter to her grandchildren in which she shared with them a conversation she had with God. Listen to this. I said softly to God, is my time to come and live with you getting closer? And God said, yes, but don't be afraid because I will always be with you and I will always take care of you. I said to God, but I will miss my family and my friends and they will miss me. And God said, yes, but I will comfort them and turn their tears into joy, and they will remember you with happiness and be glad of your life all along the way. As Natalie Sleeth died, her family reported that she would make comments like, I see the light. I hear the singing. It's so beautiful. I'm so happy. The final words that Natalie Sleeth spoke before she died were these. It's good. It's good. it's good. None of us want to die. All of us want to live forever. None of us want our loved ones to die. But death does come. But Easter Sunday shouts to you and me that life does not end in death. That there is life eternal, that there is heaven, that there is promise beyond this life. Listen to me, my friends. Right now, here in this place, there are some of you who have loved ones who are critically ill. There are some of you who have recently faced the loss of a dear loved one. May we all hear these words. When death does come, it's good. It's good. It's good because there's the promise of eternal life. And finally this, the resurrection confirms that God is in charge of history. If you had been one of the followers of Jesus after the crucifixion, you would have found yourself demoralized. You would have felt that once again evil had defeated good. Once again hate had defeated love. Once again the powerful had trampled upon the lowly. Once again the morally corrupt had defeated the morally upright. If you and I had been his followers back then, we would have felt like once again evil wins, once again hate wins, once again moral corruption wins, once again political might wins. But then God raised Jesus. And it was God's way of saying, I am the one in charge of history, not Caiaphas the high priest, not the Roman Empire, not Pontius Pilate, the governor of Judea. I am the one who is in charge of history. And though it may seem otherwise, I am the one in charge. I like the way one Christian thinker sums it up when he writes, yes, evil will have its day. Yes, evil and injustice and unrighteousness will have their moments in the sun. There will certainly be days when we wonder who is winning the battle of history. The resurrection of Jesus says loud and clear that God has the last word. Just when it seemed power-hungry Pontius Pilate had won, what did God do? He raised Jesus. Just when it seemed the narrow-minded religious voices had won, what did God do? He raised Jesus. Just when it seemed that reason and compassion and goodness had been trampled underfoot, what did God do? He raised Jesus of Nazareth. The resurrection of Jesus is without a doubt the most clarion statement ever made of who in the end wins. To me, this world is a mess. I know the world that is out there to which you and I will go globally is a mess. I know there is rampant violence. I know you will go home and I will go home and hear the news again of the hatred and hostility that is pervasive across this globe. I know that we live in a world that we wonder at times if there's any hope whatsoever. I know that. Believe the resurrection story. Just when they thought they had won, God won. And in the end, whatever you see now across this globe, remember this on Easter Sunday morning. God is in charge of history. And God will win. Someday, God will win. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. And because he rose, we know he's the Son of God. And because he rose, we know the God of resurrection is at work in our lives right here and right now, whatever the difficulty. Because he rose, we know there is life beyond death. And because he rose, we can have profound hope in the God who will someday take charge of history and win. Thanks be to God. Amen. Would you stand for our